401k advisors want to build a scalable practice, but aren't always sure what to do next. Welcome to Outcomes, the podcast designed to help advisors think, make decisions, and cast a vision to create a business for the future. Here's your host, Ross Marino, financial planner, author, speaker, and CEO of Advisor2X.
Welcome to Outcomes, the podcast. Today, I am joined by John Clark, retirement plan advisor with the Heffernan Group out of the Bay Area. Hey, John.
Good morning, Ross. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm an East Coaster. You're a West Coaster. On the West Coast, what I'm aware of is that state-run plans are now on, and they seem to be rolling out more quickly than a lot of people. I know you're up on it, so can you talk a little bit about what's going on with the state-run plans?
Yes, it's been a really interesting ride watching what's gone on with the Oregon and California programs and also the city of Seattle. And it's been interesting to see not only the focus that I think we all knew was coming, which was how do we expand coverage? You know, that's been something our industry has been working on for a long time. But what caught us was that these states, specifically California and Oregon that I'm most familiar with, passed legislation to say we need to expand retirement savings for everybody. And rather than just mandating that people go out and buy a 401k plan or a 403b plan or some sort of solution, they actually created a product for these businesses to use. So they went out to the marketplace, did an RFP, and created proprietary products for the states. And California and Oregon have different products with different requirements, but it was just really interesting to see that the decision that the states made was not just to require coverage, but to require coverage and then create a product that's there as a requirement, and then competition in making sure that we as advisors know what's out there as an alternative.
Did you have the expectation that there would be some legislative driven mandate of coverage, certain percentages? Were you expecting that there would be something that says we, the private sector, now have a better opportunity because it's now mandated? Or were you thinking the state-run plan is coming anyway?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be kind of the state-run plan would be the extreme backup for your organization that's just doesn't fit for the existing retirement plan, 401k or 403b, situations that we've created. But I think the states have a much loftier ambition of who this product is actually a fit for. So I think my impression originally when the legislation was coming out and the reporting on it was going to kind of be like a Medicaid. It's there in emergencies. It's not very popular. It's important that it's there, but the states are taking a very different approach of saying, no, this is a real competitive offering that we want businesses to use if they don't want to go through the 401k process and be subject to ERISA.
So you just said a couple nuggets there. One was competitive, the other was ERISA. So let's first go to competitive. So I'm going to assume you've reviewed the products. Could you talk a little bit about the details and mention the competitiveness of each of the details?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Cal Savers program and Oregon Saves at their core is a Roth IRA that is then funded from employer contributions. So the benefit of it being a Roth IRA is that it's an individual account, so they're not subject as employers to the ERISA mandate. There's a benefit there to the employer in that, we work with small employers that have, 10 franchise restaurants and a lot of high turnover and low employees, but they have more than 100 employees. So they'd be subject to the audit requirements and all those different pieces. So, that's one of the benefits of not having the costs of ERISA. Secondly, the way they've structured the program is that there's no cost to the employer. So there's no employer-based, not even a $25 per participant that you see sometimes with simple IRAs. The costs are all shifted to the employees. So the employer has administrative tasks associated with it, but doesn't come out of pocket really in the way that they would for any other type of retirement program. And I think to a subset of employees, that's very appealing of the no liability of ERISA and the no administrative costs for anything.
So have you been able to look at the employee costs and then compare to anything a typical retirement plan advisor would offer?
The yes, so it depends on how you look at it in terms of breaking out of the cost of the employees to the employer. But for what I've seen on the Cal Savers, and again, it's a range, and they have target date funds, and everything's pretty much passive. But all in fees are right about 1%. I think they're 102 on the website is what they say. So, when you look at that compared to a retirement plan, it can be competitive. Again, it's not the most competitive, but if you're comparing that to a $0 401k, sometimes you'll see an asset fee or administrative fees that greatly increase the cost to either the employees or the employers. So it is a competitive offering in both the employee side. Again, the funds were new, kind of custom created for Cal Savers, so I haven't really dug in on the performance or the construction, but being mostly passive vehicles, it is competitive from a fee standpoint to the participants for a small plan. It's not going to be competitive when you get to a larger organization. And I think that might be what California is looking at, is saying, okay, we can maybe grow out of, the Cal Savers and move you into a 401k plan, but that lack of portability between the Roth IRA won't ever give them that true base to build a 401k plan. So that's going to be another question, is what happens when these organizations decide, okay, we now want to do a 401k, and you have all these employees that have IRAs.
And you beat me to my follow-up question because you've thought about this stuff, of course, way longer than I have, which is why you mentioned to it. So if you install that plan, it's really just a bunch of individual Roth IRAs and
Mhm.
not an employer sponsored plan like we would think. So the mandated plan is an IRA, Roth IRA, and it's not an employer based plan, which that is attractive to certain employers because it's almost the one and done mentality where once the money goes in, they're out. It's in the employee's hands, it's on them. The employer
Mhm.
doesn't really have much to do with it. So the administration of that plan, if someone comes to you and asks a question and you're a plan sponsor, you probably get to say, well, we don't really manage it. It's state run, number one. And number two, it's individual. So it's on you. So that
Mhm.
might be attractive to some people that really don't want to commit manpower resources just to run a plan.
And that's where California is getting there in 2022, and Oregon's already there. It gets down to 5 employee companies. So these could be, mechanic shops, they could be hair salons, they could be, small offices where nobody wants to save more than the $6,000 available into a Roth IRA. The only administrative challenge that the employers do have to work through is the auto enroll and auto increase features that they have. So you have to automatically enroll the employees at 5% and then increase them annually up to 8. So there is some administrative back end, depending if you are a 5-person company and run payroll through a spreadsheet, it could be challenging to do that. But there is, and we've talked to organizations, we who Cal Savers is the best fit for. They have people who are only looking to save $3,000. They've got a lot of employees that don't make a lot of money, and so Cal Savers is the best fit. The Roth IRA gives them benefits. They can convert to traditional if they want, but that's a whole process that you can do to the state. But it will be a fit for some businesses, and I think I was surprised that they created a product, but it is starting to see the appeal for certain organizations that just haven't. 401ks are kind of trying to fit that round peg into a square hole.
And knowing that some of these smaller organizations where they may be limited on resource allocation, the capital, the manpower, they have higher turnover
Mm.
employees, they have lower income employees. We can run down the list of who would be a decent fit for this. Like you said, you've already run into a few where you think Cal Savers is it. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going to assume on this end that version 1.0 is not going to be version 5.0. So play this out 3, 4, 5 years. You think this is just a little side gig for them to kind of fill a gap, or do you think the ambitions are a little bit higher for these state plans?
I think the states have higher ambitions, but I think one of the challenges that they're going to run into is if you end up with 50 plans, or then you start having major cities like Seattle set up their own. you could end up with mandatory retirement plans if you're a franchisor of restaurants or something where you have 50 employees in 4 different states and you're managing 4 different plans. I think there'll always be a challenge of multi-state employers. I don't think any of the states at this point are interested in going to an ERISA type plan where the state's taking that on. But it'll be interesting to see, in terms of the evolution of where these products go and how the different states will interplay with each other. Maybe there'll be a kind of a regionality. There'll be a West Coast plan, and California and Oregon and Washington will say, well, we're all using the same administrator on the back end. We can get better economies of scale if we merge our 3 plans together. That could be something with like-minded states moving together. I don't know. It's always challenging when you're dealing with different governments in different states. They all get to make their own decisions, and sometimes it's communal and sometimes it's not.
I'm only chuckling because I'm thinking from the retirement plan advisor's perspective to the states, welcome to our world. It is not that clean. And what one group wants, another group doesn't. What one group really needs, another group doesn't. So it's just not that simple. And I usually look at the marketplace and I think if a solution isn't out there to what is an apparent problem to anybody who's deeply involved in the industry, there's some big fat boulders sitting in the path. So
Mhm.
it's not the idea where someone comes up and says, "Oh, I know how to do this." A lot of smart people are always thinking about this, and it's been a challenge. So I think the state-run plans are. I think it's a great attempt.
Mhm.
I tend to be an optimist, so I want to see all types of parties trying to push down that path and get around the boulder, and we'll see what comes out of it. But I still struggle with what's the solution for the resource allocation that it takes to run a 401k. I don't know if state-run plans have beyond a limited scope where they can help.
Mm.
But then again, you just never know. We've seen it, right? Things all of a sudden develop and away you
Right.
go. Anything else before we change topics? Anything else you want to mention on the state plans?
No, I think I agree with your point that it's important that we all, the states, advisors, record keepers, federal level, try and fail, because not be afraid of failing, because it is the coverage issue is not going away just because we'd like to wish it so. It's going to be an ongoing thing, and I do applaud states for trying something, and like you said, it's going to be an evolution like anything. This is 1.0. There'll be parts that work, there'll be parts that you're not going to be happy with, and then they'll hopefully modify and get things moving in a better direction.
Yeah, I see one of the challenge just as you were speaking about it, and then we'll move on to another topic is if this is going to be attractive to higher turnover businesses with lower to moderate paid employees, and maybe others will do it, but if that is a group, every time they switch employers, they're now going to learn that they can access their principal, if that's the case, tax free.
Mhm.
They just have to pay taxes on earnings if that's going to be how the law will work out, and maybe a 10% penalty. And um, cashing in a pre-tax 401k to pay tax and penalty is too attractive for many people on lower income. And in
Mhm.
many cases, it's a desperate situation. So if it's now a Roth IRA and they learn that they can cash that out when they
Right.
leave employers, what are the balances going to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now? I'm not sure you're going to get much traction and much growth because maybe it's just too accessible for people and the penalty just isn't going to hurt enough.
Yeah, and I mean, that is always the other challenge of leakage when people change employers, because you're right, the selection that, in at least my opinion, is going to be higher turnover businesses, lower wage businesses, where the demand for a real retirement plan isn't that high.
Right.
Um, and the benefit is, as long as you move from employer to employer to employer that has Cal Savers and you never have that break in employment, sure, that could work. But you're right, as people, have a couple months off or weeks off and find that they have access to a pot of money, it's always a high likelihood it'll be rated.
So you've got 13 years with the Heffernan Group.
Yep.
Their benefits, a lot of other things. You're on the K side. Tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was founded in 1989, and it was in 91 we moved in the financial services group, and the Primarily, it's property casualty insurance, employee benefits, and then our financial services division. Again, a handful of other unique things that you have along with the property casualty. Um, but that's where we've been kind of working as an organization to try to figure out the intersection between those three different divisions and how we can help businesses and non-for-profits kind of manage their overall risk and their benefits offerings to make sure that they're, you know, using the right tools and the resources that you can have when you have those organizations together. Obviously, there's a lot more synergy between the financial services K side and the benefit side, but we're also seeing a lot of benefits and workers' compensation kind of merging together in terms of how you manage that workers' compensation risk with your healthcare program and the costs associated there. So it's a great business. I know just enough about property casualty insurance to be really, really dangerous. But I know when there's good questions and great people to learn from. And also kind of I think there will be, similar to what we see sometimes with PEOs, there are some levels of having those together that make sense for employees, and some employers like to have them separate, just kind of is how the company wants to look at their overall picture.
So what do you think about PEOs?
We looked at it as an organization of trying to start our own PEO, and decided that it wasn't going to be a fit for the type of businesses and organizations that we work with as Heffernan as a whole. I think PEOs, they're similar to other programs like we were talking about with Cal Savers. They fit for a certain type of business. Again, the pooled risk, whether it's the benefits, the economies of scale of the benefits, and sometimes with the property casualty insurance, you can get some adverse selection going in there. Um, Lots of times we find organizations just kind of have their 401k go along for a ride with the PEO, may or may not be the best fit, and usually they can at least carve that piece out if there is an adverse selection on the benefit side or workers' compensation side that have the PEO make sense. So, you know, we work with a lot of companies that have PEOs for their other benefits, and we have the 401k plan. Um, but it's one that we've, as a business, thought altogether it wasn't a place we wanted to spend our energies, but was a fit for some.
Now, you're in the Bay Area, so I'd imagine that not having to fight the traffic for the
Yeah.
last year or so has been a really cool thing, but times are changing, John. So tell us what it's been like and what are you guys going to do going forward?
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was similar to, I imagine, most areas that had traffic issues. The whole Bay Area became accessible, and what Google Maps said it would take to get there was what it took to get there. There was no traffic adjustment, which was wonderful. But that's changing, and we're seeing on big uptick in traffic in our local area. People aren't taking public transportation, but they are coming back to the office. So traffic is almost as bad as it was prior to the pandemic, because people who used to be on public transportation are now in their cars. We're as a business opening up. We're waiting till September when most employees are going to have their kids in school, and just thought that was a nice clean time to bring his employees back. But we're going to have a hybrid workspace, and I think a lot of the Bay Area will do the same. I think there's going to be huge benefits for bringing employees together to collaborate, generate new ideas, camaraderie, culture, all of those things. I'm just not sure that employees are going to want to go into the office to sit on a 401k or a 403b investment committee meeting. I'm not sure that they're going to come together and say, this is worth fighting the traffic. This is worth, really culture building in our 401k. I think we're talking with clients about moving some of our quarterly meetings, moving to Zoom, and doing more in-person lunch meetings. And that seems to have been more well received, as saying, okay, let's get together as a committee. Let's talk about the ideas of what we want our benefits program to look like 2-3 years down the road, and do that over something that's social. But if we're reviewing the investments or reviewing what's happened with our automatic enrollment, we can do that over a Zoom meeting and cut down on the traffic time.
You're also doing individual meetings with participants. And when we first spoke, you shared how the interaction about the 401k or financial planning is different when you're speaking with someone who's in the office as opposed to when they're at home and possibly sitting with their spouse or their partner. Can you talk about that dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, we had always done employee one-on-one meetings at the office. It was, you'd sit down, you'd be in an office for 30 minutes or an hour or however long the meeting was and talk with the employee about their retirement plan or their financial plan or whatever breadth that they wanted. Once we had to snap to being Zoom meetings and remote and everybody was at home, we found a lot people were a little more comfortable talking about broader topics. I think anytime you're in your workplace, you're a little more guarded about your finances regardless. But the other big one was people would be asking questions and we'd ask, okay, what is your spouse's retirement plan? And somebody would say, oh, hang on a second, let me go ask. And they'd turn around and they'd bring their spouse into the conversation or partner or whatever their financial lives are intertwined with. And it just kind of hit us that there is a benefit to having a Zoom meeting is that people are at home, they're more comfortable. And then secondly, they can include their spouse and financial partner in the conversation together to help us come up with a better financial plan or picture. We had found a lot of times in the office meeting, we'd ask those questions and the person we're working with would have their opinions of what their spouse or partner thought the retirement plan looked like. And then they'd be sitting next to each other on a Zoom and they'd both look at each other and realize they weren't on the same page necessarily, or they were on similar pages, but how they got there was a very different path. So it just allowed us to have a more in-depth conversation. And so we're taking it away as one of the positives of the Zoom world is that we can have that more private conversation. We'll still go back to doing some in person in the office, but throwing out that option of, would you like to make this a Zoom? You can include the spouse or partner, whomever you have your finances tied with. And that there's been an appeal to that so that we also now have a lot of our meetings are, you turn on the Zoom screen and there's the two people sitting there who you're going to be talking to as opposed to just the one employee one-on-one.
What about the younger people in the fire movement? I'm sure you get a little bit of action with that.
Yes, I'm part of the oldest wave of millennials. So while my generation kind of says I should be a different one, I do fall into that oldest of the millennials. We get a lot of those. I want to be financially independent. I don't want to work. I want to retire earlier. And there's a lot of great goals. The fire is financial independence, retire early. The financial independence piece is great. I'm really happy that people are focusing on that, understanding that their money can help them make money. But with a lot of what we're seeing as we dig into it is that it's more a focus on burnout or unhappiness with the level of work they've gone through. And I think the pandemic especially has caused a lot of stress and disrupted a lot of people's focus. We want to help people come up with their financial plan, and some people that is retiring at early. Some people do set that goal of, when I'm talking to a 22-year-old, if I want to be retired by 45, and we help discuss with them what that would really look like. And some of them I'm sure will do it, and good for them. And most of them will probably pivot more to something that they prefer to do rather than working for the tech company that they're working for, the startup culture that's very intense and high stress. I think we'll see how that plays out, but I think it's more, they want to build their financial independence so that they can drop their stress levels more than really, retire to a golf course at 45 or go camp around the world. It's more take a sabbatical, take some time off, find something that you're a little bit more passionate about to lower that overall stress.
Yeah, we know a lot of that movement is just tied into escaping. But
Mhm.
to me, the other part is that you have young people who are telling you what their future version is actually going to want. Right? See, you just start cracking up because we know that
Yeah.
it's a saying that I have that I've picked up over the last few years, which is, I am not qualified to tell you what future Ross wants. I've learned that because
Yep.
past Ross wasn't real accurate so many times. And of
Yep.
course, life happens, plans change, and here we are. So, as financial planners, we certainly come to that point where we realize life goes on, we change, life changes. So, I think that's to me, that's one of the negatives of the fire movement is trying to convince people, the people who are pushing that movement,
Mhm.
that hey, this is awesome, you should love this. But it's just one of the deceptions. But the bonus, they're thinking about saving money. So I'm going to go with
Mhm.
that's a pretty cool aspect.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. Is we're going to take what we have in terms of their very motivated savers, and then like you said, it's the future that always kind of gets in the way of a great plan. And it's
That it
that
does.
challenge of life changes, and we're also seeing more people responsible for generations above and below. So as life continues to shift, that retire early gets tweaked a little bit as people actually get towards that time that they had set in their 20s of what they wanted.
Certainly does. Life is unpredictable and it's never optimal. However, if we had a magic wand,
Ah, yeah.
you might be able to wave that magic wand and change anything in the world. So let's close with the magic wand question. If you could wave this wand, John, change anything in the world, what would you do?
I think one of the things I took out of the pandemic that was great was the ability to have that hybrid work. Prior to that, I spent at least 15 hours, if not more, in my car, just driving to and from meetings in traffic, to and from offices. And I got that 15 hours, and yeah, I worked some of it, but I got more time to spend, with my family and doing things that I enjoyed more than sitting in traffic, which is just about anything. But that's where if I had the magic wand, I think it's going to be a process, and it's going to be a yo-yo, and businesses are going to have to figure it out, and people are going to have to figure it out. But I think the idea of commuting 2 hours every day to an office is going to shift, whether it's smaller regional offices or hybrid work or 2 days a week or whatever it is, to give people more time of their lives back. And I think that's one of the things that I hope, and I don't have to wave the magic wand and make it work, is to really kind of cut down on the amount of time and driving people have to do using technology, using hybrid work to get more of their time back for themselves. Because it's one thing we can't create is more time. So we've got what we've got, and there's 24 hours each day. And if I can take 3 hours out of traffic and get that to do anything else with, I think that would be what I'd like to keep from the pandemic if I could wave your magic wand.
I agree. I think the pandemic was long enough where we've seen a contrast between all of that time in the car and doing it video. And it's been long enough where people are comfortable enough with video and they're happy that they spend time at home with family or even working more productive than sitting in traffic and all the things that go along with that. So I'm really curious to see what the hybrid world looks like. I think it's win-win for many companies and many people, but we'll see how it
Mhm.
plays out.
Yeah, absolutely.
John, this was great. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was great conversation, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you for listening to Outcomes. Subscribe now to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Advisor 2X. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.